Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Build a Data-Driven Culture. My name is Tom Tungus. I'm a partner at Redpoint Ventures. And I'd like to introduce you to our wonderful panelists today. Next to me is Han. He is a data science manager from Airbnb. Xian is head of data at GoFundMe. And Colin is chief analytics officer at Looker. And today we're going to be talking about how you can use data to change your culture and transform your business. So maybe to kick things off and ground everything, that's each one of you to talk a little bit about how data came to be at your businesses.
You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I've been at Airbnb about 2 years, and Airbnb started around 2008 but it really got going like 2011. And so data actually has been a really integral part of Airbnb, and the number 7 or 8 hire was a data scientist, and he actually built the data team to about 80 people, and he recently is taking a vacation. and data is very important to Airbnb, and we have a very strong data culture, and a lot of decisions are made with data backing, and we track a lot of key business metrics. And we have about a team about 80 data scientists supporting the whole org, making various decisions, tracking various key metrics.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think GoFundMe is not a typical Silicon Valley startup. So it was created in San Diego. It's been around for 6 years. The Silicon Valley team was created last year. So the data team was formed actually at the beginning of this year, and I joined in March, so I've been there for 7 months, so we're very new. So in the first 5 years of the company, there was no data team. So there was only one engineer who was able to hook up an analytics system and run basic A/B tests. So when the new data team formed, so right now we have 8 people. So we basically build a lot of things from scratch, including building the team, building the system, the processes, and tools. So we basically work on 3 areas. So data engineering, that's the data stores, the tools, and the ETLs. On top of that, we build data product, install the recommendation prediction features, as well as analytics. Including product analytics and business analytics. You might be wondering how it's possible for 8 people to work on so many things. I think one of the principal, really important things to make data self-serve. So we provide tools and training to make users be able to answer their own data questions. For example, we use Looker extensively in one company. So I think it would be good to have Colin talk about his experience at Looker.
Nice shout out, thank you. So actually our full corporate name is Looker Data Sciences. So data is very core to us. We actually don't do very much data science, which is kind of ironic. But we're a platform to let people get more value out of all of their data. So we have worked with companies big and small. I was actually a former customer before I joined Looker at a company called Hotel Tonight, and we were one of the very early buyers of the product. But for us, we view data as kind of a core competency of every single company. And so we're trying to help companies more effectively unlock their Salesforce data, their transactional data, all the data that's locked in their SaaS products. And we're kind of built around enabling everyone to do that.
So, being data-driven is more and more important because the speed of business is changing. People have access to more data. There's a lot more competition. And we all talk about this notion of what it means to be data-driven. What does it really mean? Like if we unpeel the onion, inside of each of your businesses, when you say we're data-driven, what does that mean day to day?
At Airbnb, I think, so now we do yearly planning or 18-month planning or 6-month planning, quarterly planning. And at Airbnb, it's a very matrix-driven organization. So we have, by function, then we buy product, essentially, or by goals. And so every team that all have essentially one top-line metric goal. And then for that team, we have engineers, product managers, and data science all supporting that goal. And so the goals basically roll up to the top-level goals of the company. So the quarterly or yearly planning is all around metric setting. And these metrics actually do change. So like as we discover new insights about our business, we put different metrics in place to drive different business in different ways. And
does the data team at Airbnb have data goals, like data-driven goals?
we have data engineering, and we have like core platform data availability goals.
Yeah.
Let's see, do we have other kind of data measures about our influence?
Yeah.
Actually, recently we did a survey about. We started tracking like how our data scientists spend time.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So we're trying to analyze where most people's efforts are,
Yeah.
and whether the time is productive. So we're trying to make that more efficient. So I mean, we definitely think about in different. It's certainly the case in different parts of our organization. Data has different kind of influence. So we definitely think about do we have enough influence in different parts of the business, and how to drive that. So.
I think being data-driven is mostly about improving the speed and quality of decision-making. So I think it's more about decision-making. I think Airbnb is definitely more mature than GoFundMe. Sounds like it's very advanced and mature, using metrics to drive business decisions. At GoFundMe, we're in this phase where we're trying to transition from not metrics-driven to metrics-driven, this transitional period. And a lot of that is actually to be able to measure the performance of a different business group. It's product marketing, PR, support. So basically, I think what's important is to realize is if you can't measure something, you can't really improve it. So when you introduce a change, a product change, or some processes change, if you don't know where you stand, you just don't know whether you're making things worse or better. So it's a lot about measurement. And using that measurement, you can plan better for your next quarter and next year. So we spend a lot of time, of course, you have to build infrastructure so you actually can measure things. Then you measure things. Hopefully that can improve the speed and quality of decision making.
How did you get people to care about that?
I think it's mostly about, I think I chatted with Han before on this. It's mostly about providing value as quickly as possible. It's more, I think it's more of an MVP mentality. So what's the minimal viable product you can build with minimal resources quickly? So at GoFundMe, I think the company has huge needs for metrics and measuring the business performance. So we started there. So we were able to measure the performance of the product, marketing, PR, all the stuff. Then we can say, hey, this is not running well. Can we make some changes to make things better? And the people see the value of that, and they naturally come to us to seek insights, how to run their business better.
Yep. Yeah. I think it helps to think about what being data-driven is not. A lot of people jump, I think, straight to data science and super heavy algorithms.
Yeah.
And Google is the most data-driven company in the world because they employ thousands of data scientists. And that is probably the final stage of being data-driven, is super complex data products. I think there's stages to it. So I think the first one is being able to measure everything that's happening in a business in so much as you can. Then I think it's an expectation that every single person, when they're making decisions, when they can back it up with data, are backing it up with data. And then I think from there, it's setting goals based on the data that you have and actively trying to push those things. So while I think people do jump to kind of super heavy algorithm stuff, which is amazing if you have the people to do it, kind of walking before you run and just having people be able to answer their own questions and be able to quantify what they're doing so that when you can shape a decision with numbers is the single most important thing you can do to be data-driven.
So if I'm at a company and my company is not currently data-driven, but I want to be more data-driven, what is the profile of my first hire as a manager of that team?
I can start. Yeah. So we've seen all sorts of different teams, kind of small, large, integrated, non-integrated. I think the skills that you're looking for are communication ability. So data is not as simple as just structuring a database so that someone with really strong SQL skills can go pull everything they need. Yeah. It's building an environment so that people that can answer questions, that are smart and compelled to learn about what they're doing, can go do it. So I think it's some technical ability, it's some communication ability, it's a little bit of business understanding. And if you can find the mix of those things so that you're contextualizing why you're doing all of this data stuff, that is probably your first hire, and then you need to fill out a team with people that can actually execute on that.
Yeah.
I will start with one data engineer and one data analyst.
Oh, why is that?
I think, so data engineer, I think is critical to be able to get data into some kind of data warehouse. So you have data. There's a lot of work there, actually. Then you need one analyst, a business analyst or data analyst who can pull data together and make some kind of insights. I'm actually more of an algorithm background, so when I came to GoFundMe, I felt like I can apply my algorithm skills, but that's not the case. I have been spending most of the time actually trying to answer the business questions, which actually is the biggest value add right now. So we're not at a stage working on super fancy algorithm can move the business to the next level. We're just not there yet. Maybe next year I can actually apply my skills. But I think definitely it has something to do with the stage of the company. And I bet Airbnb is probably different story.
I think it definitely depends on the stage of the company. So, I mean, in Airbnb, like I said, different parts of the company is more data-driven or less. And so most recently, for about last year, I started to lead the data science team for all our customer service related activities. And so in that part, we have traditionally been not very data driven. And so I think, it's almost starting like a new team. We actually, about a year ago, had one data scientist on this effort. Yeah. Now we have 8. And so we essentially just built this team from scratch. Like you said, we definitely, initially the data is very poor. The data quality is very poor. We work with a lot of third-party vendors, so the data that's coming in needs to be validated, and when they are cross-joined, they're just sometimes don't match up. And so there's a lot of work in data engineering for sure. Actually, but there are other work that I'm coming from a more machine learning and natural language processing background, and so there's definitely a lot of things needs to be done in terms of data engineering, setting up the right metrics so all the teams could be aligned. I was able to find some projects where, especially focused around ticket routing, where we can apply some machine learning and route tickets properly, and where we can introduce a lot of cost savings in our platform. And so that buys us goodwill with other teams, such that builds up the data science brand, so we can do more.
Is that the way that you found that it worked? You start on one project, you achieve some success, then the company is willing to invest in data science more, you have more influence in the company, you can do more. Is that the way that it worked at Airbnb?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at Airbnb, we definitely have this kind of, MVP kind of mentality too. So it's very, we just didn't get 8 data scientists right away, right? We started with a few people, we proved that, by focusing on 1 or 2 projects that's really high impact, and we demonstrate these impact, then we get more resources.
Yeah.
So,
wait, so let's just take a step back. So are there 3 different roles within these data teams? That's what I've heard. There's an analyst, there's a data engineer, and then there's a data scientist. Is that the right way to think about it, or is it more complex?
That sounds right to me.
That sounds right.
That's about right too.
And the goal is you hire the analyst and the data engineer first, and then the data scientist much later. Why would you end up hiring a data scientist?
Well, for data scientists, we tend to have data scientists building machine learning models or do really deep insight diving. If there are things like A/B testing or more traditional statistics where analysts can do, we don't really need the more data science power. But not everything can be textbook. So there's a lot of things that's not textbook, and you need to do deep dives, and
who's figuring out where to apply the heavy stuff versus where to do the really simple stuff? How are you guys deciding where to deploy complex algorithms versus simple statistical models?
Well, we use data. so we size everything. We look at for the data, even maybe at very rough initially the data is kind of poor, we still try to analyze, understand what the error bars are, and then we size it. We do very rough sizing, and then we prioritize the project, right? And some project can be doesn't really need a lot of heavy analytics or algorithm work, and we can deliver a lot of impact, and we go for that too, right? It's just sizing the benefit versus effort. So
yeah, I think there's also this generalist transition or evolving to specialist type of organizational structure also has something to do with stage of the company. And of course, ideally, you want someone who can do everything, who can write ETL, who can do Bayesian statistics, who can answer business questions. But it's incredibly difficult to find those people. It doesn't scale. So usually start with more of a generalist profile who can do a little bit of everything. And as the company grows and the problems become really complicated in every area, you tend to hire specialists. And you say, hey, go deep in this area. And then you come this, you just cut it off for different functions and different specialty and different profile, and you hire people in that way. So it's definitely a functional stage of the company.
Yeah. I would say, to bring it back to data culture, I think one really important thing to always keep in the back of your mind is that the most effective companies with data, I think, are the ones that deploy all of their employees the best to use those things. Like, it's kind of interesting when I look back at when I was at Hotel Tonight, a lot of big insights that we had about pricing and kind of inventory and things like that came from people that would probably be classified as like non-data people.
Yeah.
But because they have business understanding and access to data, they can go do their job better and answer questions better. So I think the more that you can push decision-making down to every single person, like that is where things get the most effective. So kind of separating like where the complex algorithms get applied so that like something automatic is happening that's amazing, and where just making a marginally better decision about kind of whether to buy here or there, or kind of how much money you're spending on inventory and how quickly things are turning over. Like separating those two problems is incredibly important.
Yeah. But Colin, you've seen, Looker works with hundreds of companies, and so you've seen how hundreds of companies actually use data. How do the most effective companies train and teach their employees?
I would say in baby steps is probably the simple answer. Like, it's not realistic that kind of if you dump all of your data in a giant database, that everyone is going to be able to explore every asset of all of your underlying tables. That's for the 1% data people. So I think it comes back to kind of finding small use cases for people. If I'm a market manager for a transportation company or like a logistics company, helping them do their job better and look at kind of how many rides are not getting fulfilled and kind of turn rates for drivers and standardizing metrics so that they can kind of have some structure to their job, that will drive people to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. And kind of the tribal knowledge will drive a lot more data ability. So I think not trying to bite it all off at once is really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe we'll take a stop there. Are there any questions from the audience? No? Oh, well, let's keep going. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's an interesting story? What's been one of the biggest impacts at Airbnb of the data science team?
Let's see.
That you can share.
I could share. Interesting. Well, sorry, I'm blinking out here a little bit. Let's see. I mean, perhaps I can just continue on the previous thought, which is, the data team at Airbnb is quite large now, and we definitely are going toward this more specialization and for certain set of things, we're just making them standardized tools. Like, for example, running A/B tests, or we have what we call ERF, that basically engineers or data scientists or even like people who are non-technical basically can self-serve and run experiments. And then we also have this web-based SQL system called AirPal, which actually is open sourced, that enabling everyone in the company to use our data. And so certain people have top secret access, and most people have anonymized data access, so they can basically dig into the data if they like.
How do you determine? So that's an interesting question, right? One of the big things about data-driven culture is lots of different people suddenly have access to data.
Yeah.
Who determines who has access to what data? Is it the data team?
No, it's decentralized.
It's decentralized.
I think we can't like roll it up to all data team. So it's essentially, I think it's up to like the engineering manager or the data science manager or the managers to decide what level.
I've never really seen that done top down.
No.
Kind of generally what happens is that when you have 5 employees, everyone has access to everything, and then when you get to 50, some small subset loses access to a thing, and then kind of you slowly build who has access to what over time, and the gaps get filled as needed.
I don't think access control is definitely a really important thing for data privacy and all that. But actually, I think the biggest impediment to data availability to everyone is actually after a while, there are just hundreds of tables, right? Like there's hundreds of columns. And how do you document it all? For even a data scientist who comes on new, right? There's just so much data, and to understand the intricacies around all the columns is pretty difficult. So it's not a matter, you can have all the access, but looking at the data,
How are you guys handling that?
We spend a lot of time. So I think my team at least spend 10% of our time, every single person, on educating, onboarding the other users of company to use the data. So that includes onboarding, structured courses, documentation, and we build template on Looker or SQL so they can change the parameters. We have a data office hour twice a week. We have a Slack channel called #AskData, so you can ask data questions. So for the last 3 months, we only have 8 people, and that Slack channel has 60 users. So I think I see that as achievement.
Yeah, totally.
Before, people were not able to answer questions themselves. Right now, they can use Looker or SQL to answer a lot of the basic questions themselves. So we just enable them to answer questions themselves. Otherwise, it's not going to
What happens in the office hours? How do you set those up?
So we only allow people, or we encourage people to come to office hour for troubleshooting. So we expect you to take a stab at whatever question you're trying to deal, use SQL or Looker, and you come to us, we help you troubleshoot. So you have to clear a certain bar to be allowed into data office hour. You have to take those onboarding classes, you have to try a couple things, then you can come to data office hour.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty common. I mean, Facebook has that, Google has that, I know Twilio has that. Office hours seem to be a really good mechanism.
Yeah.
You could do it at Airbnb?
We do have office hours.
And are they broadly attended?
I'm not sure, to be honest. We actually have different types of office hours. We have office hours for our experimentation tools. We have office hours for, SQL or Python, various things. So,
So let's talk maybe a little bit about the tools. How do you, as a data team, you're responsible for educating different people on what kinds of tools, and how do you go about figuring out what it is that your customer base within the company needs and what you should buy?
In terms of tools, we definitely have some tools that we build internally. And so I think for the experimentation, basically we didn't really do the time-based analysis previously, but we basically had an offsite. We said, what do people do in terms of activity, and what can be streamlined, and what's repetitive. And so we just figured out what that is, and we made a tool out of it, and tried to have more people around the company to self-serve. So I think both AirPal and the ERF framework came out of that. And then for documenting the data, we're starting this new project, what we call Data Portal, where we're documenting all the tables and all the columns, so that helps knowledge sharing. And we also have, so we started this new thing, which is also recently open source, called Knowledge Post, which is basically, essentially all the data people do their work either in R or Python. So they use RStudio or IPython notebook. And so they're already documenting their work. And so we're just making it easier. So as people use RStudio, as people use IPython, they can basically publish these markdowns and archive them, and then it's shared broadly within the organization. So that includes, plots, includes text about how to understand the data, and also queries that. So basically everything is reproducible. So when a new data scientist start, they could go back and read these, and they're tagged, and so it's a very good way for us to share knowledge. And I think before this, we definitely had a lot of kind of duplicating efforts. So when new people start, they might look at the same thing over and over again. But here, by doing simple searches and reading archived or existing knowledge posts that encourage knowledge sharing. It's been a big win for us. So.
Yep.
We use Looker and SQL.
Did they hire you?
So I think our plan is to make people who don't use Looker to use Looker, and then we upgrade Looker user to SQL, and we upgrade SQL user to R. So that's our
life cycle
progression. How to make people more sophisticated, right? So we spend a lot of time investing in a lot of it making data more consumable, because a lot of raw data is just very difficult to handle. So we build a lot of derived data to make it really easier for people to consume, both in Looker and SQL and R.
Colin, what do you see in the buying processes?
I mean, I think the general process, it ties back to a lot of things that we're saying, where there has to be a business use case for it. So it's usually driven by one group, sales or marketing wants to understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then either that tool is getting kind of into a bake-off departmentally, and one department buys it, and maybe it spreads naturally, or maybe multiple departments are looking at the same thing. I would say buying from the top down is happening less and less, and kind of tools are getting bought from the bottom up, just like SaaS products do. But I think it comes back to people are trying to figure out what types of questions that they're trying to answer, and then they're just looking at the market for the tools that can answer those questions.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on the end of time. Can we have a big round of applause for our panelists, please? Thank you very much. We also have a free giveaway. So I work with Looker. I'm on the board of Looker, and we did a research project understanding how different companies win with data. And so we wrote up a bunch of the different case studies in a book called Winning with Data, and I have a box of them. So if you're interested in reading about how some of the biggest internet companies in the Valley, including Twilio, Google, Facebook, and others, use data in order to create sustainable competitive advantage, please take one. They're in the box. I'll put them on the stage. Thank you very much, again, for coming to visit How to Build a Data-Driven Culture. Thanks, guys.